Welcome, everybody, to the Fifth Round Podcast with your host, Ian Ford, Brian France, and, of course, I'm the closer, Brian Mariano. Now, guys, last week we had Uriah Hall on. That was a lot of fun. We got to find out what his favorite Disney movie was. So that was really cool.
Under the Sea.
Oh, my God, it's awesome. That was still really cool. And thank you guys for listening, everyone out there on the Facebook page, Twitter page, everything like that. Guys, we missed a few things last week that we need to catch up on this week, but we're going to start with breaking news out of the Ronda Rousey camp. It's not so much her camp, but her home. Ian, what exactly happened to Ronda Rousey's home?
Well, believe it or not, pictures surfaced this morning of her home vandalized. Somebody took a black spray paint can. She just moved into a nice new house, and somebody took a black spray paint can to the siding of the house and spray painted something. At this point, nobody can tell what the heck it says. Pictures came out of her. She looks fine, like she's all healed up from it, but it doesn't really bode well at this point that there's still such negative resentment that somebody took it to the point where they're going to go to her house and spray paint it. France, what's your feelings now a week later with the sentiment around her, whether she comes back?
Around her coming back, I have no idea. But seriously, who takes someone losing a fight that serious that you go and graffiti their house?
Well, I mean, we've seen this around sports for a while because, especially when you see, just for example, this past week, Clemson wins the national championship in college football. Everybody in Clemson, South Carolina is going nuts. They're vandalizing streets and they're flipping cars over. Ian, you remember back in the day when they had the Albany kegs and eggs thing. So it happens. People lose their minds over sporting events. It's not really a surprise. It just seems as if this is another story in the Ronda Rousey saga after her last two fights.
Yeah, but I mean, that's something different. I mean, those people, that's the night of. This person went out of their way to go to Ronda Rousey's brand new house and vandalize it, just like someone went to Anthony Pettis's and ruined his cars. I mean, that's just craziness.
Yeah, at this point, though, it's not surprising, not as surprising as it would be anyways, because the media and the sentiment this entire week has just been a little bit nuts with Ronda Rousey. The mainstream media and the MMA media are on two different pages. For all the talk from Rousey that she thought the MMA media stabbed her in the back after the home fight, it wasn't fair to her, they're coming to her defense and having to prop up her legacy and say, look, you guys are nuts with all of this talk to the mainstream media between, Skip Bayless, Michael Rapaport, and Shannon Sharp, and then, Colin Cowherd over here and this guy over there trying to talk like she was never good. Mm-hmm. And, white girl privilege is why the fight got stopped from Michael Rapaport. The issue is this is crossing over into the mainstream, which is what the UFC wanted. They wanted to see this go mainstream. They wanted to see this hit media that it never gets, and that's where you get your buys, that's where you get your views. Unfortunately, they're not educated in the sport, and this isn't just a stick and ball sport like baseball or basketball where you can pick it up and have a semblance of knowledge because you grew up with it. Mm-hmm. This is MMA. It's entirely different. Shannon Sharp, Colin Cowherd, Skip Bayless, anybody on that level, I respect what they do, but they don't have the knowledge to talk about this sport and to turn around and have everything blow up on Rousey like it has. Let's be honest. Let's sit back and look at it. She's still going to go down as an all-time great. Mm-hmm. She's still a trailblazer. She's not a terrible fighter.
Nope.
Don't turn around and act like she was never good and we just didn't know it for the 3 years that she was crushing every top contender you could find.
Yep.
She still did that. She still ran over everybody.
Let's see. She finished every single person that she fought before Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes. So
all but one in under a round.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and I do agree saying that she's, was white privileged and to say that she was, almost a has-been. I do agree that's a bit far-fetched, but let's remember, Ian, let's not jump over, since I am part of the mainstream media, that we are uneducated on it, because most of us talk about baseball, basketball, and other sports, even though we are not exactly the ones covering on a daily basis. So as a consumer, we should know that we're going to take the word of Ariel Helwani or someone who's always there covering this. I'm not going to go and ask Adam Schefter about the MLB baseball draft. No. I'm going to ask Tim Kirchin.
The problem is that the MMA media doesn't have that reach. There are not a lot of people in this world who know who Ariel Helwani is.
Yeah.
Or who know who Luke Thomas or
Brett Okamoto, any one of those guys.
They generally don't know. They don't have that reach.
They need people like us.
Yeah.
That's what they need. They need to be listening to the Fifth Round podcast.
You want to know what's going on in mixed martial arts, you don't turn on ESPN.
Yep.
You go to the internet.
The UFC wants that.
Yes.
They want you to be able to go to turn to ESPN and say, okay, what happened this past weekend
But
at
it's
UFC
not
Fight
there
Night
yet.
or whatever.
This is a really, really, really bumpy move into trying to get that working. But at this point, if you want educated media on it, you need to go to the same place you've gone forever, which is smaller, internet-based news media from specialized sites like SureDog, MMA Fighting, Bloody Elbow, Cage Potato, something like that. They know what they're talking about. When you get somebody like Skip Bayless saying she's a has-been, I can take that. That's a rough take. That's a really rough viewpoint, but I understand if you believe that. Even as an MMA fan who's been watching forever, I understand that. To say she's a never was, that's a problem, and that's where it's going. That's an issue. Look, you can't take away what she did. She has holes in her game. They've been exposed. This is also mixed martial arts. This sport moves and grows at a rate that nothing else moves and grows at. The champions of 3 years ago can't even stand in the same cage as the champions of today.
Nope.
Dominic Cruz's movement was so crazy that guy could beat anyone on any given day 3 years ago.
I would argue that maybe an NFL player could be that. Think about an NFL running back nowadays, though. How often is an NFL running back? You get your Le'Veon Bells, your probably Zeke Elliott for a while. You had a few of those guys that went on for a long time, but the average NFL running back now is even sharing time.
Well, I'm think along these lines. This is more where I'm going.
Okay.
If you put a Barry Sanders in his prime on an NFL team today, is he a 1,000-yard rusher?
Oh, especially like if he's on like the Cowboys or something? Absolutely.
Yeah. You put him on an NFL team today, he's still a great running back. Now, that's not true in every position. Some of your 1960s linebackers might have a problem today in today's sport. But if you take a player from 1993, you take the leading receiver in the NFL, the leading running back in the NFL, and the leading quarterback in the NFL in 93 and put them in today, they're still going to be Pro Bowlers.
Yeah.
If you take the UFC champion from, we can't go back to 93 because it wasn't even the same sport, but say 2003.
Yeah.
You take Chuck Liddell and put him in a cage with a light heavyweight today, that guy's not top 10. He's going to die.
Yeah.
The sport just grows because new techniques, there's so much involved in it, so many nuances that the way things change is at such a faster rate than schemes in the NFL.
So, and I want to touch on this too when we get into the BJ Penn fight that's coming up this weekend on UFC Fight Night. You can catch that on FS1, which is good. We were talking about it before the show, before we started taping, about how they're planning this for FS1 right after the NFL coverage on Fox. So make sure when you guys are watching the NFL this weekend, click over to FS1 afterwards to grab this fight. That's on Sunday on FS1, the BJ Penn fight. Now, getting back to Ronda Rousey, it's not so much, this is, like we were saying, it isn't shocking that you see this happen to celebrities, but where exactly is this going to go with her now? Because, yes, the mainstream media has kind of put her out to pasture already, but what do you guys think her next move is going to be? Because now we saw after the home fight, she kind of went away and hid for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Is her next move to jump right back in and say, nope, I'm not done yet? Or is it to, you know what, all right, maybe I'm good. I should go and look at other career opportunities?
Well, I think there's two chances here, Brian. The one is that she doesn't come back at all, and then we don't hear from her at all. She just disappears. Yeah. She's got the money, right? I mean, she's got enough money.
Oh, she's got plenty of money.
Now, if she does come back, if that is going to be the move, how long do you think she waits, and what do you think she does?
I think she waits a year. Hopefully, I guarantee she'll stay with Edmund, which is a shame. That's if she does come back. I mean, she was talking about before the fight even happened on the Ellen show that she maybe have a few fights left, maybe retire by 32. I mean, this is your second loss. I mean, why not just retire? You always wanted to go over to WWE and do some wrestling, and they loved you over there for WrestleMania and everything. So,
see, I'm thinking WWE. I don't think that's a possibility. Maybe as a one-off here or there, but I don't think it's a full-time possibility. That's a lot of work to get good at that, and I'm not trying to knock her, but if you saw Entourage and you saw Fast 5 or whatever Fast and Furious she was in, I forget. Man,
7.
All right,
Whatever.
let's be honest. Let's just be honest. Her acting leaves a heck of a lot to be desired, and I just don't really think that she's going to make it on a mic.
Well,
she's no Dwayne Johnson.
I agree with you in that aspect, but Brock Lesnar wasn't that great on the mic either. They just threw Paul Heyman next to him and had him do all the talking.
So it's a possibility, but I don't think that's where she goes.
Okay.
If she does come back, and I'm going to be the, playing devil's advocate here, and I honestly feel this way. I think she comes back. I'm one of the only people I know of that thinks she's going to come back. I do think she will
come back.
I think she'll be back.
She's going to come back too?
I would love to see her come back.
But you don't think she will?
I'm not expecting anything. I'm just hoping she does.
I'm going to go.
I think you're in the small
I'm in the minority.
Percentage. I agree. Yeah.
I think she's back, and I think you see Brock Lesnar by mid 2018. I guaranteed.
Well, he only had a year suspension, and that's back from July. So you could possibly see him this July.
Absolutely, and I don't think it's a possibility. I think you see Brock Lesnar, and I think you see Ronda Rousey, but she's got to make some tough choices, and I don't think they're going to be ones that she even really gets to decide on. I think they're going to be made for her. If she comes back and she stays with Edmund, can you imagine the media blitz that she's going to face? Oh, she's back with the same coach. She's going to answer all the questions about Edmund. I think she's going to look at it and go, okay, I can answer questions about how is my new camp as compared to the old one, or I can answer questions about how are you still with this guy?
Mm-hmm. And she's going to have to. She's not going to have the privilege of not doing media and stuff like that. She's going to have to answer these questions if she does. So
almost by necessity, I think she's going to be with a new camp, whether it's full-time or part-time. She might travel to another camp and train for a bit and keep Edmund as her head coach, which is still a bad idea, but she might. But I think she'll be back. I don't think it'll be a year and a half. I think it'll be faster, sooner rather than later. I think she'll take some time off, but I think you might see her by this late summer, early fall. And I don't think it's going to be a main event, and I don't think she's going to have any crazy opponent out there. No. I don't think you're going to see any rematches. I think you're going to see
she makes a deal with Dana White saying, all right, I'm going to come back, just get me the win, and then we can pump something up later.
Yeah, because right now, unless she wants to fade into obscurity or go to the WWE, which even now is not as big a deal as it would have been if she won.
Sure.
I mean, look at Gina Carano. Gina Carano didn't come back to fight because that fight, there was a contract ready to go with Ronda Rousey a few years back, and she didn't do it because she turned around and went, if I come back and I get just beat on by Rousey, what does that do to my movie career?
True, and that's what begged the question after this fight was, obviously after the home fight, everything was knocked down. And this is where, when we started this discussion about how the mainstream media is looking at her as opposed to the UFC writers and reporters. But you have to admit, Ian, that there's definitely a shot taken at her legacy. There's a shot taken at her promotability because now that she's lost 2 in a row, she isn't the baddest woman in the world anymore.
No, and she needs to gain that back. And the biggest issue is going to be, I know, or I believe, and most of the MMA media believes, that girl can still fight, and she's still really good, and she's still incredibly dangerous. Mm-hmm. But the same way that the casual fan looks at a 125-pound fighter like Demetrius Johnson, oh, that little guy, that little flyweight, if you're a guy who goes, or a bro who goes to the gym and wears affliction shirts, you think you can beat Demetrius Johnson up because I weigh 215. Well, congratulations. He's still going to run circles around you and kick the living crap out of you. Mm. Take a look at what happened when Roger Huerta, all of 155 pounds of Roger Huerta, fought a University of Texas starting offensive tackle who was 6'6" and weighed 320 pounds in the middle of a street out in the front of a bar. Guess what? Roger Huerta beat the living hell out of him, and that guy doubled him in weight. Yep. Well, Ronda Rousey's still going to come out and kick the crap out of 99.9% of women in the world.
Yeah, but it's interesting to see
the mainstream media doesn't believe that, so she's got to come back and make them believe it.
As a member of the mainstream media, I don't believe that.
So she's got to come back and prove it.
I honestly think she's done. I think she's in hiding. She's done. But we've seen this movie before. We've seen her come back after this, and ultimately, I think if she has that fire to still want to be the best, then she has to come back. Yeah. If she's content with what she's done and say, okay, I ran into 2 people that, hit me in the face 100 times and that's not my style, then okay, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this anymore.
I think if anything, if she comes back, reality has set in that there might be things we need to actually work on.
Yeah.
You might not want to be surrounded by yes men all the time. You might want to get into a real fight camp. Instead of training with the 4 horsewomen, I mean, there are red flags everywhere we should have seen. She's got 3 main training partners with a grand total of 1 MMA win since she came to the UFC. Jessie Minduke, 1 win. Shayna Baszler, 0 for. Marina Shafir hasn't won a fight in her career. And those are her training partners. She had to have seen this coming. I can't believe we didn't, because she was so dominant, we just didn't want to believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see her fight, if she does come back, either someone like Jessica Ai, Ashley Evans Smith, Leslie Smith, somewhere in that caliber.
I honestly, if she comes back, I don't want to see her against a fighter with crazy power. I don't want to see her against a fighter that's going to have the ability. I mean, let's not forget, Amanda Nunes is the hardest puncher in that weight class by miles. And Holly Holm, you saw that fight go a lot longer because she couldn't do the damage with her fists. It took a head kick. Now, a head kick from a 7-year-old is going to knock you out. I mean, that's a shin into your friggin' skull. That hurts. That knocks people unconscious.
And head kick from a professional ex-kickboxer is going to do some damage.
You put her up there against somebody who can't necessarily one shot knock her out, and you don't give her a title fight. I mean, at this point, you kind of had to, if you're the UFC, bring her back and give her a top opponent. But I still think Amanda Nunes was a bad idea. She should have come back against somebody in the contendership, but not right for the title, because this is what you got. Now, this is just another problem facing the UFC. Now, Rousey's out, and McGregor's not fighting for a while.
You have Daniel Cormier's injured.
Yep.
You have John Jones can't come back till July.
Still suspended. Lesnar's still suspended.
Stipe Miocic doesn't want to come back for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, so we've seen a lot of issues going on with the UFC now. Let us know on Facebook, guys, if you think. I mean, I've said I think Ronda Rousey's done. Ian, you're saying she's going to come back, and she's going to come back with a vengeance. France is kind of hoping she comes back, but not really sure. You know what? I really jump in one side or another.
I can't pick.
That's okay. That's why there's 3 of us on this podcast. It's okay. So, of course, the Fifth Round Podcast, Brian France, Ian Ford. I'm the closer, Brian Mariano. Now, guys, there was other news that happened we didn't get to last week because we had Uriah Hall on, everything going on with the Ronda Rousey, UFC 207. There was, unfortunately, someone we had to say goodbye to in the UFC, and that is Mike Goldberg. He's been there for 19 years. He reached out on Twitter saying, I wish I could respond to every single fan, fighter, member of the media who reached out to me and showed their support, gratitude, and appreciation. I've been overwhelmed with so much gratification from all of you. Thank you so much. And just for the record, I still believe that Anderson Silva's precision is precise.
Yes. Yeah. Mike Goldberg.
Yeah, to make sure you threw that in there.
Mike Goldberg's going to be an integral piece of UFC history forever. He has called so many great fights since 1997. That's almost 20 years of fights. He's was amazing for a time. The UFC let him go, and he barely got a chance to say goodbye. Right? You watched the Rousey fight in the last few seconds before 207 ended. He got to say something for about 15 seconds. It was barely even noticeable. It's a shame he didn't get more, but that's what you should expect in that job. There's never a big send-off. Guy leaves ESPN, guy leaves Fox, guy leaves Fox Sports, guy leaves anything. You don't see a giant send-off like you expect for a Chris Berman. That's like
that's what you're seeing now with Chris Berman at ESPN. And it's not like he's retiring or anything. He's just taking a lesser role. But you see this with people who are prominent with their organizations. You know, with him being there almost 20 years, it's to a point where you guys don't know anything but him.
No, but I think you almost, I think less than being prominent with your organization, I think you see it with a guy who you know is not going to go work someplace else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chris Berman's not going anywhere else. When he's done at ESPN, that man is done. Mike Goldberg's not leaving because he wanted to, from what we've heard, and he's probably not just going to run away into retirement. The guy's going to work somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, he's 52, so in broadcaster years, he's got 20 years left at least. Look at Vince Scully, for God's sakes.
I would love to see him do something else. I don't know if it's going to be a different MMA organization. Bellator has expressed interest. The WWE had interest years ago, and he stayed with the UFC. He might not be allowed to do that based on the contract. That was, the agreement when he left. That's not uncommon with the UFC to do a non-disclosure agreement and say you can't talk about this and you can't work any place in the same kind of media for the next so many years. Honestly, he might go to the NHL. Everybody forgets that guy is a giant hockey fan. He was a hockey player.
Yep.
He might end up going doing some NHL broadcasting. All that would be awesome for him. It's a shame to see the guy go. He was such a big part of the UFC. I'm not going to miss some of the things he did. Just a take to be 100% frank with it. The guy made mistakes. The guy was not the perfect broadcaster.
No.
But he
there
did
are none.
so much.
Just letting you know.
More than
there are none.
More than some. I mean, he never made the giant mistake on air, but he did say things like, Travis Luter's the Michael Jordan of jiu-jitsu. Things where Joe Rogan sitting next to him had to go, "No, Mike. No, you're dead wrong. No, Mike, you're wrong." When your partner's got to do that.
But that's not really his, being somewhere for 19 years, yeah, you're going to make mistakes. We all do. But he clearly was good enough to keep going. And that's Joe Rogan's job, is to keep him in check. The same reason why they have NFL players on with Jim Nantz, Mike Tirico, these guys. They're not experts in the field. They're very good broadcasters.
So I guess Joe Buck needs one of those.
Oh my God! Listen. We could do an entire podcast on Joe Buck, and I would just go off for the whole 45
By the way, on that note,
minutes,
because I haven't done it yet, how about them Packers?
Yeah, we're not. Listen. We're not going to go there with that. Okay. All right. Yes, your Packers beat my Giants. Congratulations. Now go beat the Cowboys, or I'm going to hate you forever. Other than that,
See what we can do.
Yeah, you better. All right. So Mike Goldberg, he obviously has left a lasting legacy with the UFC.
Absolutely.
And you were talking about it a little bit ago, Ian, about, you might have a non-disclosure agreement, whether you can go wherever. I always thought that about like a guy like Mike Tirico. You saw him, or Dan Patrick with ESPN. These guys are ESPN. They're not going anywhere. But that contract calls, man. NBC calls. Oh, wait. I get to go cover the Olympics. I get to go this and that. If that phone call comes, I'm telling you, he's going to take it.
Oh, my
whether
God,
it's WWE, whether it's NHL, whatever it may be.
I feel like WWE would be a good fit for him, to be honest. I don't really want to see him go do MMA somewhere else, just personally. Yeah. And I don't know if anybody else wants him. But if you're telling me Bellator doesn't want Mike Goldberg screaming "it's all over" into a mic, just like it's a UFC fight,
It's
that
the
call.
Of the take.
Well, I mean, that's what he's known for.
That
That's what
call.
you know.
That
you
call.
Know, yeah. I mean, the end of the Rousey fight was insane.
The guy, he's a great hype man.
Yeah.
And people don't realize what work comes into that. Joe Rogan shows up the day of the fight, maybe the day before, and he does his little bit of work. He's got comedy, stand-up shows in the meantime. Mike Goldberg's doing all kinds of work all week long, taking notes, doing production, doing all the fighter interviews. That's going to be hard to replace this guy. That's another topic entirely. I mean, there's some names that have been tossed out. I'm not exactly happy with most of them. We'll see where it goes. Apparently, we're not going to hear anything for a few months.
No, and it's one of those where it seems like the UFC is kind of piecing it together as they go.
And the rumor mill's running. So,
well, I mean, you're talking right now because Todd Gresham's going to be taking over at least in the next 6 months.
And you've still got
doing a little tryout.
Yeah, and you've still got guys like John Anik. I don't know who's going to be promoted to pay-per-view. At this point, Joe Rogan only does U.S. pay-per-views. I don't know who his broadcast partner is going to be. I'm going to guess John Anik, but don't quote me.
See if I can pull it up on here. But Jim Rome's been thrown out there.
God help us if that happens.
Listen, I was a fan of Jim Rome's for a little bit, and obviously because I'm more into the horse racing point of view and him being involved in that, so I kind of like him a little bit there. But on the air, that's completely different.
I don't think that shtick is going to work live cage side, and I can't imagine what happens. Man, he almost got beat up by an NFL quarterback. Okay, when he started calling him names. What do you think's going to happen if he calls a UFC fighter a name? That guy's going to get tossed. Now, either way, apart from Jim Rome in a cage fight, this is just another big sweeping change for the UFC. And WME keeps making them. We had another card canceled. First, UFC 208 in Anaheim is now UFC 208 in Brooklyn because they canceled a whole pay-per-view card.
Yep.
Then they just got rid of another card right before 209 in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep doing this. They are in a different business model and in a different format than Zuffa ever was. They're not playing the long game. They need money right now. This is why we've seen titles appear out of thin air. This is why we've seen cards get shuffled, and Rousey leaving hurts them. It really does. They're trying to rebrand and remarket this entire organization.
And it's almost like, Ian, you were talking about it before UFC 207 and how much they were just hyping Rousey. It was all Rousey. This is the comeback. She's back, going to take over again. And then you said it on this podcast. If she loses, now you didn't promote Amanda Nunes at all, and now it looks bad on them.
Yep. And she's got a great storyline, Amanda Nunes does. This is the first openly gay UFC champion ever. And people don't even know it. You have a sports champion.
Do they not know, or do they not care?
I don't think they even know. The mainstream media sure doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't heard, even after this, Amanda Nunes knocked Rousey dead in less than a minute. But all we're talking about is Rousey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even us, we're guilty as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we haven't mentioned Amanda Nunes at all. Even last week's episode, it was, the fight was great. She knocked her out. It was awesome. Oh, yeah, but Ronda Rousey.
But she's the side story to Ronda Rousey still. And that's unfortunate. And I can't think of any major sports organization where you have an openly gay or lesbian champion. And Amanda Nunes is. And she's got a great storyline from what she's gone through in her childhood to what she's gone through in her career. She was middle of the pack, losing fights at 145, then came to 135, losing fights, and she's turned it around to become a champion. And she's an absolute monster in that cage.
Yeah.
Nobody throws like she does at that weight class. But you've got absolutely no coverage for her.
No, and not only is she an openly gay champion, she's also from Brazil, which there hasn't been a real Brazilian champion in a little while, and you need that because Brazil is starting to fall off the map. Yeah. And that's another one of your big money makers for out of U.S. Territories.
Well, see, here's the problem with that, though. This is the big issue with that. WME needs the quick money. Well, guess what Brazil doesn't get you? Quick money. They don't buy pay-per-views.
Yeah, they don't.
They're good for a TV contract deal, which is awesome every few years, but they're not good for pay-per-view buys. The UFC's focusing on the U.S., and they're focusing on Canada. Because guess what? That's where all your pay-per-views are, is North America.
Sure.
People in Mexico are not buying pay-per-views. Brazil? Nope. The UK? Nope. Japan? Don't think so. Definitely not China. Just right here. So we're focusing on this market as much as we can if you're the UFC.
So, and honestly, that has to be a mistake because obviously the business model should be longevity, making profit, but this new organization is really pushing, no. We paid a ton of money for this, and we want it right now.
$4 billion.
Yeah, and we were talking about this in previous episodes and I posed the question to you guys. We've started kind of seeing, like you were saying, Ian, titles coming out of thin air. We're having UFC fight nights every weekend. At some point, sooner or later, your roster cannot handle this.
No. Then they're more than that.
Your stars can't handle this.
The big names, absolutely, Brian.
The big names can't handle it. They have over 400 fighters under contract, so they need to get those guys fights.
And how many of those do you know?
Well, and here's the big issue.
400
how many of those that you know are not here right now? Conor McGregor on an extended break. Ronda Rousey just lost, maybe not coming back. Cyborg Justino, guess what? She just failed the drug test, and she's going to be out for a while, more than likely. Josh Barnett, he just got popped. There's a possible USADA failure right there. Okay, this is what happens when you get those big names up, and the UFC should have seen this coming. Zuffa, before, should have seen this coming. When you pick up Cyborg, she's got drug test failures in her past. That's the one big knock on her. And you have the most strict drug testing in sports. Guess what? She's going to get caught. Josh Barnett, that guy got stripped of a UFC title for failing a steroids test way back when testing was literally pee in a cup and we test for 3 things. He got caught. Then he got caught again in affliction. Now he's caught for the 3rd time in his career. I'd be surprised if we see him fight ever again. Mirko Krokop just retired from Ryzen because guess what? He got caught with drugs in the UFC. You're losing people left and right. BJ Penn is on his way back this weekend, and that guy hasn't fought in 3 years because he's been trying to get a fight for a year and a half, but he's failed this and he's failed that.
And he's gotten hurt and all sorts of...
This is a big problem. They are running out of names, and they're relying on belts now. God forbid. What happens if Holly Holm loses the 145-pound title fight coming up at 208? Do you think they want Germaine de Randamie as a champion? Oh, no. God, no. They want Holly Holm. Well, guess what? You already lost one of those bets, one of those gambles with Rousey. Let's see what happens with Holly Holm, because if she loses that fight, they're gonna throw their hands up.
They need to promote both of them, because if you don't promote both of them and you only promote one, what kind of story do you have after that?
We're gonna see
the person that beat the Holly Holm, who lost 2 in a row.
We're going to see nothing but Ronda Rousey getting a head kicked by Holly Holm. Guaranteed.
Yeah, that seems to be like it's going to be the tape beforehand. That's all you're going to keep seeing is that. But are we starting to, because we've touched on WWE a few times in this episode, are we going to start seeing more of that type of script?
Oh, they've tried.
But it seems like that's all. That's what you have to do if you're trying to make this quick money, because there's no way the name itself, Holly Holm, is selling that fight next month. No, it's not.
This is exactly what the UFC has tried to do for a while. And Brian, we've seen it for years. You know, the grudge match is the best match you can make, makes the most money, and you try and run those WWE style storylines. We might see it with Cody Garbrandt, TJ Dillashaw coming up.
Yeah.
Former teammates. They've been talking there's some heat between them. TJ Dillashaw is underhandedly making comments about Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt's coming right out and talking crap about TJ Dillashaw. But guess what? Here's the problem. You can't script this. This isn't the WWE. They set it up perfect for Ronda Rousey to have this comeback, dominate, win, and just come out guns blazing, million buy pay-per-view after million buy pay-per-view. And Amanda Nunes said, no. And that's it.
Yep. Or when they promoted the hell out of Paige Van Zandt and she lost in the first round by rear naked choke to Ashley Watterson.
Well,
Sage Northcutt.
And they pushed that Paige Van Zandt fight much more than just the two names, because she was on Dancing with the Stars, and you tried to grab that audience that, oh, I remember her. I remember watching her with my mother or whoever it may be when you were watching that. So, yes, I understand that. Is the issue going to find out, or are we going to realize now that since most of the roster isn't American, and we can't have that storyline where they're on the mic all the time pushing the Conor McGregor type pump up for the fights, is that one of the reasons why we're hurting pay-per-views as well?
Well, it depends. I mean, they're having success. They are. Last year, they set a record for any organization or sport as far as pay-per-view buys or pay-per-views over 1 million buys. They had 6 pay-per-views over 1 million buys.
Yeah, but
it's never been done.
True, but who are they really going up against with that now?
Not a lot, but they are setting records. Nobody's ever done that. They've never done that.
Boxing, I agree. That is a big deal, because boxing at its prime wasn't that. But also there was no real pay-per-view buys. The last time pay-per-view buys were big for boxing, Mike Tyson was fighting. You had your Mayweather, Pacquiao,
but
that's about it.
This is their most successful year on pay-per-view. They are killing it. This is why that sale was able to be made.
Look how many times Conor McGregor fought last year.
You only get it with certain fighters, though. That's the issue. So they need to find...
You got it with 205. You got it with 206.
They got to find a functional way to promote fighters to make them stars. Now, you can't make anyone a star.
They got to promote themselves. I mean, most of the people nowadays...
But some of them are trying,
I'm getting so sick of it, though. All they're saying is, I want the money fight. Who the hell is the money fight right now? Stop saying money fight. Again, call out people.
We talked about this a couple months ago. Chael Sonnen, on his podcast, came out and spoke to what you do to promote. Hey, listen, guys, I'm not saying I'm a genius, but I'm saying I did this, and I became a superstar and made a ton of money being an okay fighter. Okay, Chael Sonnen was never the best in his weight class, and he was never even an exciting fighter. He was boring to watch a lot. But that man was a superstar because he didn't come out and say, I want whoever they'll give me. Well, that's all well and good, but
he
that's
also
boring
didn't
to
say,
hear.
I want the money fight.
He never said, I want the biggest fight for the money, and he never came out and said, I want the title. I just want the title. If I can't get the title, I don't want anything else. Man, there's a science to this. He came out and he picked a fight. He made it personal. He knew who he wanted. He wanted Anderson Silva because it was money and it was the title. But did he come out and say that? No. He got on the mic and said, Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck. And then he picked on Brazil, and he made jokes about Brazil until Silva got mad, and now you got a grudge match, and that sells. So guess what? Tyrone Woodley, I don't like you, and I don't like watching you fight anymore because all you do is come out and go, I want whoever makes me the most money. All right. I don't like you. I don't want to see you fight because you're literally not even in this to be the best fighter in the world. At least that's what you're showing me. You're showing me you just want a payday. All you want is my money, and I don't want to give it to you because you don't even know how to promote yourself. No. And then you complain when you don't get what you want.
But at least he finally signed the deal with Thompson.
Yeah, because Thompson came out and picked a fight with him and said, look, Thompson's not a guy who wants to promote. He said it to Ariel Helwani. I don't like promotion. I don't like doing this. I don't like talking crap. But you know what? I wanted this fight that bad. I got tired of waiting, so I went on Instagram and I posted my contract with him and said, what are we waiting on? And within 24 hours, Tyrone Woodley signed it because he got called out.
But
that's it.
Isn't that where we are now with this new UFC? Because we're pushing the big fights all the time, need to get all these pay-per-views in, and ultimately, if these guys are introverts and they don't want to do this, the UFC has to do it. So ultimately, you're going to run into the problem where either the fighters have to do it themselves, and if they have to do that, they want a bigger piece of the pie. They're going to say, if I'm going to have to put all this effort in to do this because you're not, then I want more money.
Well, see, here's the thing.
That'd be exciting.
Most of these guys.
That's what I would want that. If I'm the one that has to go in and put in the work all the time, if I said to you guys, if we were getting paid to do this, and I said, I'm the one doing this and doing this and doing this, I want 50% of it and you guys can get 25 each, I'm going to say yeah, because I'm the one doing all the work.
Yeah, so look at Conor McGregor. He's busting his ass and he's exciting.
Well,
and he's winning fights.
To stay on track with it, though, this is what happens. Most of your top fighters get pay-per-view shares. And all of your top paid fighters are the guys who go out and talk on the mic. You get rewarded. It's not always immediate, but you get rewarded. Nate Diaz make way more money than they are worth in a cage because they can promote a fight.
Yeah, and you saw even like this weekend the disparity between Ronda Rousey and Nunes is what they took out of that.
Because who sold the fight? Let's be honest.
Agreed.
Why did people buy it?
No doubt.
So if you go out and you promote a fight and you are good at it, when that fight comes and people buy that pay-per-view, you get a piece of the pie on every single pay-per-view buy. So it makes a difference on your paycheck. But you've got to do it. Unfortunately, this isn't the WWE. I can't grab Paul Heyman and go talk for this guy.
Yeah.
I can't
You might
do
have
that.
to. You might have to at this point.
It won't sell. Even a translator. No. At this point, Jose Aldo talks a lot of crap.
He does.
But because of the way he talks and because he talks through a translator, no one cares.
So, no. I do agree with you that on the mic, that might be an issue. But knowing that you have a lot of Brazilians, you have a lot of people who don't, like English is not their first language. But if they can go on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it may be, and they're throwing whatever they need to at their opponent, just like you said with Tyron Woodley.
Habib Nurmagomedov.
That's what you need to do.
I'll pay you $200,000 to fight me.
We talked about that last week.
Man, that guy's English is broken, and it doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter because you know what? Reread, he's going to do what? And that just generates interest. So ultimately, I think we agree that in order for the UFC to stay profitable and to have some longevity, the fighters have to unite and actually take apart promoting their own fights.
Yep. And they need to do it smartly. If the UFC was smart, you remember they used to do the Fighter Expo?
Yeah.
They did the Fan Expo, but leading up to the Fan Expo, they would get all of their guys together and they'd have a seminar on something for this year, something for that year. They don't do it anymore.
Yeah, that's something that I would agree has to
Why don't
happen.
you get them all together and show them? Look, they're owned by a talent agency now. WME is a talent agency. Mm-hmm. That's what they do. They promote stuff. So get your guys together. And I don't care if you hand pick them or if you do it for everyone, but you get your guys together and go, look, this is how you become a star. This isn't a guarantee that it's going to work, but these are things that have worked for other people. Do it. Make yourself money. Help us help you. The more popular you get, the more I'll pay you to do it. Why can't you do that? Because guess what? You're losing stars.
Yeah.
You are losing stars. Okay? Crow Cop, that guy could fight anyone, and you're guaranteed for buys. Mm-hmm. Guaranteed, because you could run a highlight reel of him head kicking people, and he still had that massive following. More people watched that Ryzen show than any Ryzen show before because Crow Cop was on it. And the guy won. But guess what? He's gone.
Yeah.
He's gone forever. Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, these are household names. They're gone. They're not coming back.
Who knows if GSP will come back?
More than likely not. These are all people that are gone and not coming back, and you're not replacing them. You're firing rounds out, and you're not bringing them back in. And it's not good to lose guys like Crow Cop. While we're on that subject.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's move on, because I know we were talking about that before. Of course, Fifth Round Podcast, Ian Ford, Brian France, the closer, Brian Mariano. We were talking about that before, Ian, where it got us into the issues with the UFC because now you're losing fighters, and we lost another one who decided to retire.
Where do you see the legacy of Mirko Crow Cop?
His Pride days were amazing. Absolutely amazing. His UFC career, on the other hand, was below average. The way he decided to retire and then come back and then retire again or get cut because of steroid use in the UFC and then go over to Ryzen. I mean, I'm glad he went on a high point, but when you're in the UFC, your career fell.
Well, that is, I mean, this is a myriad. This could be a couple of issues. One, we both agreed in the past, watching him fight, the guy never got used to a cage.
No, he didn't.
You fight in Japan, in Pride, or in Ryzen, where he had his most success, it's a ring.
Mm-hmm.
And a square ring is a lot easier to cut off an angle and trap a guy in a corner or position him where you want him than it is in a cage, because it's 8-sided and it's more circular. You can keep moving. It's easy to trap a guy in a corner. So for a striker, the ring is great. It sucks if you get stuck in the middle because there's so much open space. But if you're out, if you want to, a guy's chasing, or you're chasing a guy and he's running around the outside, it's amazing to be in a ring. Crow Cop never managed to get a hold of the fence, to get his mind around that. Also, the more glaring one, especially now that he's been caught in the past,
steroids.
The Pride Fighting Championships
Allegedly
didn't
steroids.
Allegedly. The Pride Fighting Championships, we know from fighters like Enson Inoue, put in their contracts, we will not drug test. We will not.
So it's the wild, wild west of the UFC or MMA.
And that's basically what Risen is right now.
Yeah. You watched when Pride came over, you had Vanderlei Silva, one of the biggest stars that came over.
Mm-hmm.
You had Mirko Crow Cop, one of the biggest stars that came over. You had, who else? Dan Henderson, one of the biggest stars that came over. You had all these big names come over to the UFC, and none of them found success. None of them found the level of success they had. Vanderlei Silva was unbeaten for almost a decade. Lost, 2 fights in Pride, and one of them was the Crow Cop?
Yeah.
And then he barely won anything in the UFC. He didn't just lose. He lost badly.
Mm-hmm.
And he aged like 10 years overnight. Crow Cop, he went from world beater to middle of the road. Never even got his way to a number 1 contender fight, let alone a title fight, because, the sauce wasn't there anymore. When you can fill yourself up with Mexican supplements and then go in there like Superman, it's a lot easier to do things than when you have to fight post those supplements and you're worse than you would have been in the first place.
Listen, man, I fill myself up with Mexican supplements all the time. I went to Taco Bell before we started taping. I know what you're talking about.
Now,
works great.
What do you feel? Where does he fall? Is he
He's one of the
UFC
all-time
Hall of
greats.
Famer?
I don't think so.
Really?
He's one of the all-time heavyweight greats, but I don't see him in the UFC Hall of Fame. And it's not because of his Pride legacy was amazing. And this is your argument with Uriah Faber. At least Uriah Faber was able to get to title fights a lot in the UFC. Mirko Crow Cop didn't even get past top 5, maybe not even top 10 in the UFC.
I mean, it was a big letdown. When he came in, fresh off that Grand Prix win in Pride, for anybody who doesn't know, he never won a belt in Pride. He got very close. He lost a title fight to Fedor Emelianenko. But they held a open weight tournament over the course of 4 months. They took, 16 guys? 8 guys? 16. 16 guys.
Yeah.
16 fighters. No weight limit. It was almost all exclusively heavyweights. There were a couple of smaller guys. No weight limit whatsoever. You're going to fight 4 times. First night, everybody fights. Second night, everybody fights. Third night, 2 fights in one night, and we're going to crown a champion. Crow Cop won that tournament. He ran through the best of the best. You're talking the best fighters at 205, the best fighters at heavyweight. They're cream of the crop, and he won that tournament. And then he came into the UFC, and he was a dud.
Mm-hmm.
He was a dud. In fact, he was famous for saying right kick hospital, left kick graveyard, because if he kicked you in the head, you were likely to die. I mean, he put people to sleep in some of the most vicious knockouts ever.
It was scary.
And he came to the UFC and he got head kick knocked out by Gabriel Gonzaga, who's a jiu-jitsu black belt with no striking.
Mm-hmm.
It just looked bad.
So it seems like, and of course, let us know on Facebook if you think that there's any way he could be a UFC Hall of Famer. It really mentions, because the first thing we got onto when we mentioned him was steroids.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And it's one of those, after we've seen Chris Cyborg,
Mm-hmm.
all these issues with guys. BJ Penn had that issue before he came back and is fighting this weekend. Is this something that the UFC really needs to grab a hold of now, or are we too late with this?
Well, that's why they got USADA.
Yeah, they got a hold of it. The problem is getting a hold of it is hurting them, and we knew it was going to happen when they announced they were doing USADA.
It was going to happen.
They are shooting themselves in the foot by necessity.
Yeah. So ultimately, do you like the NFL does. We have a policy. It's there, but we're not going to completely cripple you like baseball will.
No, this is the way they do it now is the way it's got to be. You're in a sport where we watch what happened to Ronda Rousey. You're in a sport where you get hurt. They take hours, days, and years off your life every time you get in that cage. So you're trying to hurt another human being in the most literal way possible. I do not think it's fair to go in there with an advantage medically because you took something that's not allowed to be taken and seriously hurt and disfigure somebody. So this isn't baseball where I can take some steroids and, I cheated, but all I'm doing is hitting the ball a little harder. Sure. You're not hitting that ball right into the pitcher's face every time. No. So you shouldn't be allowed to take anything. The way it is now, the UFC is without a doubt cleaner than it's ever been and probably one of the cleanest organizations out there because of the fact that if you take something, I don't care if you're Cyborg and we need you, we'll suspend you. Yep. I don't care if you're Josh Barnett and you're one of the only big names we have left at heavyweight, we will suspend you. You'll be done. Crow Cop, they forced the guy into retirement, and that guy sold fights, but he's gone.
So the question is, one, because obviously, in my opinion, when you translate it to like the NFL, if a guy gets caught, it's 4 games. All right, whatever. What games is he missing? When's he coming back? That's all I care about. I could care less whether he's taking it or not, unless it gets to the point where now he's out for the year, whatever it may be. Baseball, a little bit more, 50 games, a year, lifetime, one of the harshest, policies out there. Is it time to start discussing, yes, this is great that the UFC is doing this, but if they are as strict as they are they really just killing their product enough that we're going to not have the quality that we had 5 years ago?
I think that what we're seeing, at least in my opinion, is for most of the big high-profile failures, it's still the old guard. It's still the guys that were around before. And you have to think of the mental challenge that comes from being Josh Barnett and knowing that whether you're good without him or not, because he's still a great fighter without him, you know what you were like when you were on him. When I was on him, man, I could still bench press 220, but I could bench press 260. I could still hit this trip takedown, but man, I could throw that guy when I was on him. And that mental deficit of knowing that you're not the best you can be, you're not as good as you used to be because I can't take these things, drives you to eventually cheat. You cheated once. Why wouldn't you cheat again?
And it could be just as simple as obviously lifting more or being able. It's the way of I can train for 8 hours today, get up tomorrow, and be ready to train 8 hours again.
Yep.
Well, yeah, look at Alistair Overeem. When he fought Brock Lesnar, he was Ubereem. 260, well, probably more like 285 pounds when he walked into the cage. Jacked to the gills, just monster.
And you pull out. Look, we've seen people pulling out of fights a lot more often because you can't take things to recover.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
You're seeing it a lot now. You're seeing a lot of people getting suspended for steroids or taking something they're not. Missing weight has been a big deal now.
Yeah, because you can't use IVs to rehydrate or diuretics.
Yep. So there are a lot of issues that the UFC is facing right now, and I think this is a crucial point for them because they need to figure out, are we going to stay safe and allow this, which I think they're going to do, but how do we get back to where we were by doing this?
I think the newer generations, and MMA is real easy to separate into generations. You have the first group of guys who knew how to do one thing way back in the day. Then you have the second guard that came through. We're transitioning to the point where that second generation of fighters that came in, like Josh Barnett and Crow Cop, are on the way out the door. The old school guys. We don't have guys around anymore that were fighting in the mid to late 90s. Now we're getting rid of the big names from the early 2000s.
We're getting rid of the people that were in Pride. The Pride era of fighters that came over are starting to...
Yeah. There's not a lot of guys left that fought in 2004.
Nope.
And when they're gone, it's a different sport. Because if you think of Crow Cop or BJ Penn, who's coming up this weekend, you think of, man, that guy was really good at this and he was okay at these two. You have guys now like Dominic Cruz and Cody Garbrandt who are great at all kinds of things. That's the new generation. They've come up training this sport, not training to do something else and then deciding to do this sport.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, Fifth Round Podcast, Ian Ford, Brian France, closer Brian Mariano. Guys, we'll get out here on this. BJ Penn fighting this weekend in Phoenix, Arizona, UFC Fight Night. That's Sunday, January 15th, the day before my birthday. So what's up? Make sure you check that out. That's FS1. Where are we going with this? BJ Penn's coming back, hasn't fought in 2.5 years. Is this a money grab? Is this something where, okay, he might be looking to go bigger than this? Or is this kind of saying, I'm going to come back and fight, and then I might be just calling it after this?
BJ Penn has more money than anybody realizes. He was born very wealthy. He doesn't need the money. He's here because
he runs RVCA.
Yeah, he and BJPenn.com. He's here because he wants to fight, and he just loves this, and he still thinks he's got it. He doesn't have it. He's going to lose pretty soundly and probably going to be embarrassed, and I don't think we'll see him again. The UFC might just keep letting him come back because he's a name for the hardcore fans.
And if he's going to keep coming back, then that's fine. You know, if he wants to, that's great. But ultimately, we're going to run into, BJ Penn's fighting again.
Yeah, I mean, for any old school fan, we're going to see motivated BJ Penn yet again, and motivated BJ Penn is going to get motivated into the canvas because it's not going to last very long. Underneath that, I'm going to go with Joe Lauzon and Ben Saunders and Sergio Pettis. That's it.
Cool. Where are you going,
Actually, no. I changed that to Moraga. Pettis loses.
Oh,
I'm going to go. I was never too much of a fan of Sergio Pettis, but I'm going to pick him in this fight because he kind of grew on me a little bit with this last one. I'm going to go Court McGee over Ben Saunders.
Court McGee over Saunders.
I think he's got a little more length on him.
I think Saunders is just going to be able to submit him, but if it goes to
Court
decision,
McGee,
it's
he's
McGee.
a black belt.
McGee's going to control it. Yeah, but he trains with Chuck Liddell, man. How much of a black belt is he?
All right.
Good God. Always throwing salt.
Then I'll probably go Joe Lauzon too.
Yeah.
And then the BJ Penn, Yair Rodriguez. I love BJ Penn, and he is training at Greg Jackson's now.
And it is motivated BJ Penn.
It is more than ever motivated BJ Penn to come back. In his last fight, he looked so bad against Frankie Edgar on his tippy toes, dancing around, trying to be quick, but wasn't. It's going to be interesting to see what BJ Penn looks like under Greg Jackson, but he's fighting Yair Rodriguez.
Yeah, if he's going to win,
nasty up and comer.
If he's going to win, it's going to be a flash knockout, a la BJ Penn, Matt Hughes.
That nasty counter punch that he had.
But man, BJ Penn went over the hill against Frankie Edgar years ago. Now he's fallen down at face first.
In lightweight, he kind of went over hill.
Yeah, he's fallen down that hill face first. It's over.
But I would have liked to see him against Ricardo Lamas instead of Yair like it was supposed to be. So I'd have to go Yair.
I'd like to see him against the Joe Lauzons and Jim Millers of the world. Fight the senior circuit. Don't take on the up and coming Yair Rodriguez, who's just storming up the ranks, young, hungry, and gonna eat you for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, Ian's throwing out that there's going to be a UFC senior division at this point after BJ Penn's fight this weekend.
Well, with the tough...
it's called Bellator.
That is very true. But, I mean, with the next Ultimate Fighter, the All-Star Edition, that might be a little bit more of the seniors as well.
Yeah, we'll see.
I think they kind of announced Joe Stevenson's might be on it. So.
Oh God, Joe.
That's just could have been
Joe Daddy.
rumor.
I'm going to call Joe Daddy. Is going to be Joe Granddaddy from now on.
He might be on it from some things I might have read.
Yeah, until he breaks his hip on the way there
in the rumor mill. So.
Oh man, guys, another great episode as always. We're going to work on some guests for next week. We're looking forward to hopefully getting a few people on next week. Of course, great episode. Look forward to UFC Fight Night this weekend with BJ Penn. Of course, hit us up on Facebook. Let us know. A lot of the stuff we talked about today. Is the UFC in trouble? Steroids running rampant? A lot of issues that they have to take care of. Of course, Ronda Rousey, her house getting vandalized. Where is she going from here? A lot of stuff. Hit us up on Facebook. We'll get you on the program next week. Guys, thank you again. Of course, next week we're going to have someone on. Hopefully, I'm working on a few people, guys. You know, I have connections. No, I really don't. But anyway, of course, the Fifth Round Podcast, Ian Ford, Brian France. I'm the closer, Brian Mariano. We'll see you in the Octagon.